Excellent. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us and Tiffany as she explores STEM careers. As part of our webinar series, we are looking at computer science careers. Kiana, you're so great with that. And we are Palm Street Education Foundation. So just a little bit about us and who we are and what our mission statement is Palm Street, come on, Tiffany, come on back. Palm Street Education Foundation creates culturally competent learning materials and environments for K through 20 STEAM, which is STEM, that includes the arts, civic and workforce education using our characters, the multi-generational family known as the TurnUps. And as you can see, our featured character is Tiffany. And Kiana Cogdale, who is our, Kiana, I gotta give you some fancy title, but she is our Palm Street Makes It Happen. It's gonna give us a little history about how Tiffany came to be.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Right now I go as the social media coordinator. And so the Tiffany Wants to Know series started when we were given the opportunity to create content around COVID-19. And we did a special series about Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett, known as Dr. Kizzy, who played a large role in coming up with the Moderna vaccine for the COVID-19 virus. And so after exploring that, we wanted to have Tiffany go on and explore STEM careers after being so inspired by the work that Dr. Kizzy did in the biomedical field. So that is where we started. And so now we have been walking through and just doing highlights on the different STEM careers so that we can increase awareness of these opportunities, these career opportunities, because representation matters. And we saw that with Dr. Kizzy. So we want to, increase awareness and just really encourage people in our community to seek out careers in the STEM field.
Excellent. Thank you, Kiana. Yes, you're getting a promotion. I just got to get your title. But yes, we want our community to be aware that there are careers that you can pursue in the STEM fields that pay good salaries. And so we also, with Dr. Kizzy, wanted to show that COVID is real and that people who look like us were actually involved in the development of the solution. So like I said, COVID is real. So tonight, we have the privilege of having a conversation with Dr. Raquel Hill. And I'm going to give an introduction. I am so proud of her. I do know her as a friend. But Dr. Raquel Hill is a computer scientist with research interests in trust, security, and data privacy. Her research has been funded by various agencies, including the National Science Foundation. Her research has been featured in Forbes magazine. Dr. Hill is a full professor and chair of the Computer and Information Science Department at Spelman College. Under her leadership, Spelman College was recently awarded a $5 million grant from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, which will fund the development of an interdisciplinary cyber program, which merges computer and political sciences. She is a graduate of Georgia Tech and Harvard University. So I want to frame our conversation for the evening. Dr. Hill and I were recently having a conversation around students going into computer science and really critical thinking skills in our community, period. And so we were talking about ChatGPT, how AI is changing things rapidly. And so her being chair of a computer science department, I asked her, well, what is it that you want students to be able to do? And she said, I want them to be able to think algorithmically. And so that's how she got here. And so, Dr. Hill, I'm going to kick it off. Welcome. But my first question is just a basic one because we want the civilians, if you will, people who may not get a degree in computer science. What exactly is an algorithm? That's a term that's thrown around a lot. So take it away.
So in the most simplest terms, an algorithm represents the steps needed in order to complete a task. And all of us have used algorithms every day in our everyday lives, right? Cooking is one, example of when we use an algorithm, right? We have and I think we talked about this the other day, Dr. Clark, when I was talking about baking a cake. And so there are steps to a recipe. And I said, if you don't begin the recipe by mixing in the butter, creaming the butter, adding the sugar, then the eggs, if you add the flour first, you may not get exactly what you think is going to be that light and fluffy cake. There's some other steps that I have for the cakes that I bake, but when we think about an algorithm, just think about the steps it takes in order to complete a task in the simplest form. When I talk about thinking algorithmically and the skills that a student will need in order to be successful in a computer science major, I'm thinking about problem solving, right? So, I gave the example of, preparing a cake or baking a cake, but there's a problem. I want cake, I need to know how to make it, right? If I have a problem, as a computer scientist, usually the problem is complex. And so I need the ability to reason about that problem, to decompose that problem into smaller parts, and then create the algorithm to solve those smaller parts. And then I need to be able to integrate my solution and to solve the larger problem. So what I need for my students to come into, as freshmen, come to Spelman with very strong algebraic problem solving and reasoning skills. And so that's what I mean to think algorithmically.
I'm glad you said that. Algebra was actually one of my favorite math, when I did math, but that, math is your jam for sure, me knowing you. I want to step back and ask you, why computer science? I never asked you that question. Why did you select computer science as your career path?
Well, I think you answered that question, math. It was because of math. My favorite subject in K through 12 was mathematics. I took my first and only computer programming course as a senior in high school. And I checked my high school a couple of years ago, and unfortunately, that course I took was not being offered any longer. There wasn't a computer programming course. So, imagine that if I had not taken that course as a senior in high school, if that course had not been offered, I would have never been introduced to computing. And so I would have become a mathematician. And instead of a computer scientist. But after taking that class, I was able to translate my my math skills to problem solving, with computers in a language, right? And it was all about, reasoning about the problem, decomposing the problem, specifying my algorithm, basically the steps for the solution, and then using that language to implement that algorithm in a syntax that will allow me to automate that solution. So I decreed and declared that I would be a computer scientist. And so all of my degrees are in computer science. So I applied to Georgia Tech, I got in and I got out. That's what we say about Georgia Tech. And I worked for 3 years in industry before going on to Harvard for my PhD.
Bravo, bravo. And you said a couple of things. I love the path. You said being able to decompose and integrate the solution, which makes me bring up Chat GPT and AI as a programming solution, and what you say about it being critical to be able to do just that, like how AI impacts a programmer, I suppose is what I'm asking. Someone getting a degree in computer science.
So I think I think understanding artificial intelligence and actually how it works, it actually goes back to mathematics, right? When we think about the mathematical model that is being used, or the, I'll say just mathematical model. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of specific jargon, right? I want to keep this as simple as possible. But when we think about, the mathematical model that is being used to reason about the data that is input to the model, right? The first thing you're going to have to understand is, the math that undergirds, the artificial intelligence, right? If you really want to understand how, with Chat GPT is called a large language model. If you want to understand, like, how can we input all of this data, and the data itself is text, and we are able to reason about the relationships between the words and the types of words, just from, inputting this and so there's a model that undergirds it. And so I think what the question you were asking is that, what do I need to understand about AI in order to implement something, a tool like Chat GPT? And so you have to understand it's undergirded in the math. And there are different approaches, to learning, with these models. And so with Chat GPT, it uses a self-supervised approach. And so versus a supervised approach or a semi-supervised approach. So probably the biggest difference is between the self-supervised and the supervised. Supervised basically says that I have data that has been labeled by humans. And so I'm going to use that data for training, but I know what the outcome is going to be because the data has been labeled. Right. And so I have this mathematical model that's going to do some computation and analysis and try to discover the relationships, between, my data inputs, and be able to predict, what the output is, right? Based on, and I can assess the accuracy of that, based on the label that was already assigned. With the self-supervised, you don't have a label that has been assigned by a human. The model itself, in its first phase of its training, assigns labels, and those labels are used at later phases in the, in the computation. And so when you think about, the complexity of all of what's going on, it's one thing to understand this at a high level, like, hey, there's this Chat GPT and I can use it, and I can ask it a question. It can write letters, not letters, but essays for me, and it could actually do math problems for me. It can actually, if I give it a picture of a coding problem as far as writing a program, it could generate the code for me. We could be users of the technology and of the tool, right? But one thing I stress and I strive for creating at Spelman is an environment where students, yes, they are aware of the tool and what it's capable of doing, but they develop the skills to become creators.
That part.
So we're not just trying to create consumers of technology at Spelman College. We are creating, creators of technology. And so, but in order to understand how to create this technology, it goes back to the math.
Back to the basics. I think that's a message across the board. Thank you for that. Not just for computer science majors, people who want to go into computer science, but not trying to take a shortcut in your profession. There is no overnight success. You learn the basics to be able to break the rules, but you got to know what you're breaking if you want to go that route. I have a question just around that, flush that out a little more. The importance of being able to create versus going into the marketplace. I don't even know what that technician is called. Like if you're just moving widgets as opposed to understanding what those widgets mean, if that makes sense. Because coding widgets, I think, yeah, like a Microsoft or a Google or any of the big ones.
So I think, let me rephrase your question. I
Please
think
do.
that you're asking, what is the difference from being able to use technology in an environment or be able to create the technology? And are there any limits on what you're capable of doing? And I think there's opportunities for both, but let me tell you where the line kind of flattens for you. If you are a user of technology, and there are, I have concerns about, individuals or entities wanting us to create people that have a level of awareness of technology, but no depth. And so there are positions and there are opportunities, for people who have a level of awareness and can use technology. And there is nothing wrong with, those opportunities. But if you are pursuing a degree in computer science at any institution, wherever you're going, the skill that you obtain while in that program should be beyond one in which you just use technology. So I will say some other things. I'm being careful in what I say so that I do not mistakenly offend. That's why I say there are opportunities, for individuals who have an awareness of technology and how to use it, and those opportunities can elevate. But when you are paying $50,000 a year for a degree in computer science, you need to know your computing. Yes. And I think anyone who knows me understands where I'm coming from with this. Right. Yes. This is, you will not just be a user of technology when you finish your degree at Spelman. You will be a creator of technology.
And we need to be involved in the creation of technology.
Definitely so. Definitely so.
That segues, we have a question around, I'll phrase it. One reason why we need to be in the room is when those databases are generated, that they are representative. There's a question around how AI can harm people of color. And I know you've done some healthcare data in the past. Can you expound on that?
Well, one of the things that when it comes down to data and data privacy, whatever makes you unique can be identifying. And when it comes to artificial intelligence being used in any system where there are groups of people, where there is limited representation in in your data, your training data set, then you run the risk of there being errors associated with the use of that technology as it relates to that group. So even when you have medical data and you have AI technology being used to aid in that, if you don't have adequate representation of Black individuals in your training data, then whatever it predicts for you may not be beneficial to you because it has not been trained on your data. It cannot predict accurately. And we see the same thing happening when we're looking at systems for facial recognition that cannot recognize our faces because it's not accustomed, it wasn't trained on data with using dark complexions, individuals with darker complexions. And so it can't accurately identify you and identify your face with the facial recognition technology cannot. I mean, even during COVID, one thing that was learned was when those devices, those oximeters are not as accurate on Black people because it wasn't accustomed to reading, taking measurements from skin with more melanin. And so we see this over and over and over again. And so with regards to, medical related data, the diagnosis that we have, anything that relates to a specific group, and if there's limited representation of that group in your training data, then how accurate can the predictions be about individuals in that group, even if your data is labeled? So like going back to the supervised learning versus a self-supervised learning. Mm-hmm. So even if I have a labeled data set and I know what the outcome is, but there are limited individuals in that data set that look like me and you, then how can that model then be used to predict something about me and you accurately?
Absolutely. And I'm blanking on the young lady's name from Harvard who this was her research with the facial recognition. She used the white mask for the system to recognize her because the databases were identifying Michelle Obama and Oprah Winfrey as either men or animals. So that was the population of the database had not reflected who we are. And that's her research. And we will include that in our handout with the people. I can't come up with her name right now. But that segues me, data. Thank you for that on AI. This is under that rubric. A conversation we've had about people and their data and protecting their data. And security is one of your expertise. So, let those conversations we've had around data and, even me going crazy about our people just jumping on the latest, greatest without understanding what they're giving up because you are the product when it's free.
Yeah, you are the product. And I think that we have all been taken in by free services and the amount of information that corporations know about us is just amazing. And what you can learn from data that we have willingly or unwillingly shared online, right? Even there was a study back, I think around 2013, I think that just, I think it was from Facebook data. They looked at the musical preferences of individuals on Facebook, and this was self-reported. So this would be labeled data, right? It was already their individuals, their data basically said like, hey, I like Prince, I like Michael Jackson, I like Beyonce, just name any artist. And given your demographic information that was shared in the site, they were able to then, based on that input data and training their model on that data, just on your musical interests, they could predict your age and your gender, and I think the region of the country that you were from. So this is what, artificial intelligence can do for you, right? I don't actually need to know who you are. I just need to know something about you. And I need to have a data model that allows me to predict other information about you based on the information that I do know. And so this is the challenge with sharing. And sometimes we share information because we think that there's something being offered that we really need, right? Like the latest app.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't quite understand how that app is sharing our data. You can read the privacy policy if you can get through the legalese. It's usually not clear enough for us to understand how this data is shared. And when they say they're sharing it with third party, and if there's any analytics built into a site, usually that analytics is being done by a third party. So your information then is being taken from that website or that app, is being shared with the entity that actually is providing that analytics engine that's either embedded in your site or embedded in your app. And so they have the information, about you. And so they can then begin to predict. We've seen these things happen about how, how individuals or entities have been able to learn things about us. Cambridge Analytics and the Facebook data gives you an example of that, and all the data that was exfiltrated, from Facebook without the knowledge of the users of the social media platform. And so you just have to be mindful about how much you're sharing, because you have no idea what will be learned from the data. So I think a lot of people often think about privacy as confidentiality. Confidentiality says that, confidentiality goal says that only authorized people are able to access the data. Privacy is more concerned about you being in control over who has access to your data, and also limiting what can be learned from the data that someone actually has access to. So it's not just about only authorized individuals having access, but what can you learn about me that I didn't expect you to be able to learn? And like I said, anything that can make you unique can be identifying. And so LaTanya Sweeney, who's at Harvard, did a study, and I can't remember if it was in the 80s or 90s, and probably while she was a graduate student at MIT. And it was about using data from insurance companies about medical data of discharge records. And she was able to re-identify the former governor, William Weld of Massachusetts, by linking the discharge records with voter registration data. And what her study found was that your gender, your birth date, and your zip code could be considered a quasi-identifier. And the study has been redone and is somewhere in between. In the US, 68 to 88% of the population can be linked to their identity based on gender, zip code, and date of birth. And so this is why, and we're sharing so much more than gender, zip code, and date of birth, right? And if I can predict your age based on your musical preferences, I have one piece of that date of birth information. And so we can learn a lot of things from data that individuals are putting online. And also now with AI being able to recreate or create, your voice based on samples of your voice online, like this YouTube video. And recreate your image from other images of you in action. That's one of the reasons why the actors have joined the strike with the writers.
Yes.
And because they want to have control over their image and prevent it from being used, via some AI process that creates a likeness of them. They want to have control over their likeness.
Yes.
And so, but all of this information, all of this data is out there. We're putting up videos. Social media has become a platform for people to actually make a living, and some people do a great job at it. But in wake of new technological advances, there could be disadvantages also.
Absolutely. As AI gets more and more sophisticated with deep fakes, as we go into political season, being able to have a discerning eye, we circle back to critical thinking skills, even if you're not a computer science major, the ability to think, question if something's real or not real, is going to be essential as we move forward, as well as the conversation of some jobs being eliminated because of AI. I don't know if you have.
And well, I think that's where we have to, there are jobs that have been eliminated, given the presence or the introduction of technology in a different space. Like, I went to the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, did a tour, and they have a fully like a cashless market in there. You walk in, there are cameras everywhere. I think you have to swipe a credit card to get into the store. There are cameras everywhere. Everything has some type of identifier, and I don't recall whether it's RFID or what it is, but you pick something up and walk out, it charges you.
Oh.
The cameras are tracking you through the space. There is not a person in there. The only people who are working probably in that space are those who refill the stock in the market. And that could possibly be done by a robot. Yeah. Right. So that introduces the need for individuals to be skilled. We're going to always have people who are performing jobs that are considered to be, laborers in the market, right? And so, but those traditional labor jobs are going away. So almost in every aspect of industry, you will need the skilled laborer. And that's where we need individuals who understand how to use technology. So before I was saying, there's nothing wrong with those jobs, right? There is definitely a need for the jobs, and the introduction of technology in spaces where we did not see technology in the same way requires us to have skilled labor in those spaces. So we need workforce development that's going to address the skills gap for that. But you don't come to Spelman College for that, right? Not as an undergraduate in order to get that skill, right? You will learn that skill, but that is not why you come. you need to know how to create that technology if you're a computer scientist. And I'll repeat that again and again and again. You hear me say it. I want, for those students of mine
We'll cut this.
who may see this video, they're like, oh, Dr. Hill is preaching again.
We'll make sure that Kiana makes a reel of it and send it to you. So you can play it on a loop.
So I can play it on the loop, but it's, I'm smiling when I say these things, but there's definitely a need for skilled labor. And when we introduce new technology into these spaces, those jobs, as we know them, may and will go away. And so what do? The people who held those jobs, they need to be trained, with the technology. And so how do we go about doing that? They don't need to understand the mathematical models that are underpinning the artificial intelligence that's allowing us to use the images of cameras to be able to track you around the room, in this cashless marketplace. But they may need to use technology that will allow us to adjust and adapt the system, to address any errors that have occurred in the system.
It's a whole new world. It sounds like something you said, what led you down this path is not being offered at your high school anymore. And my understanding is that there aren't many computer science courses being offered at that level around the country.
Well, I know that I think there's a law in Georgia that by 2025, I think at least all high schools should offer computer science courses. At the high school level. And I know that at a certain stage that in K through 12, and I'm not sure if it's K through 12 in Georgia 2025, but there are organizations that are really trying to help with that. And there are laws, I think, in different states that have mandated, this change. And so they're working towards, introducing computing as other sciences are required learning, for K through 12, and that computer science will be that too. And I think it is so important. And I just finished my inaugural Summer Bridge program. This was funded by the Reboot Foundation with Dr. Dwana Franklin as the CEO of Reboot, and Intel actually funded that Summer Bridge program, which was a passion project for mine, because when I was an undergraduate at Georgia Tech, I participated in the Summer Bridge program. So I just finished that Summer Bridge program, and it's just so important that students, are introduced to these concepts, that they're introduced early, and that they're reinforced in their learning.
Bravo. What age group?
Oh, these were pre-freshmen. So hopefully I will see them all in the fall.
Getting that pipeline going.
Getting the pipeline going. And I'm not sure if I answered your question, though. I think I got a little bit sidetracked.
No, I think you did. I want to, we circle back to the main topic, critical thinking skills being able.
And yeah, we were talking about the critical thinking skills, and we were talking about, high schools not actually, having them in the limited number of courses being offered. I know, I didn't make the point I wanted to make, was that Summer Bridge program, I had students who were who will be majoring in economics, biology, health sciences, computer science, psychology. So it wasn't just for computer scientists, students who were planning to be computer scientists and majoring in computer science. It was for all students. And I told them, I said, you are all computer scientists this summer, because computing impacts everything that we do. And so there needs to be a level of understanding of what is actually going on in the field. There needs to be digital literacy and computer literacy skills that all students need to have, and computational literacy. And so problem solving and algorithmic thinking. And my students this summer, they struggled with me. Dr. Hill, I don't want to write the algorithm. And I would tell them, I said, okay, if we do not know the steps to the solution, when we get to a point where our solution fails, I said, where do we return to? Where do we go back to? They say, I have to start over. I say, yeah, you wasted your time. You have to go back to ground zero because you did not think through the solution to the problem before you started coding. You have to think, what about the algorithm?
I just love it. Oh, y'all, she bakes and she sings too, but that's another story for another day. I think, do we have any questions from our audience before we can have an after hours after we finish recording, but
I just have one.
okay.
Couple companies that you mentioned I did work for in the past, so I was laughing because especially when you mentioned Cambridge Analytica. Dr. Clark knows some trouble, some good trouble that I got into in the past. How do you feel, and I'm in security and I have a tech company as well. How do you feel about the POS systems? Because for me, that's the largest data capture that I see now that we have to control. I know with our product, we have to control our POS systems and the third parties that are affiliated to those, because the fragmented data can now be disseminated and we know what it is now. And that makes it even more dangerous, where stuff that was supposed to be deleted after tokenization is now still available to be used as good metadata. And that, to me, I feel like there needs to be limits on the POS sharing, and you know, and my background now is all blockchain stuff, so that's a whole nother world that we're going to logistically. I feel everyone from the supermarkets. I was in the supermarket yesterday, and I went to the line where the young lady was at, and she had attitude like why I was going to her instead of the machines. It's like, I'm trying to keep you employed for another week. Like you're going to be gone, and you need to go back to school. And I also see it in healthcare. But are you at Spelman expanding into the nursing? I mean, I just want us to get into more of the biomedical and start using AI, not just AI is a term that's been around forever, but I mean, start using technology in these other fields and exposing them to it.
Well, there are several things that I am doing, several initiatives, and I can tell you about. You talked about the point of sale terminals, and yes, they are a target, you know, for an attacker, and we've seen it over and over and over and over again. The breaches that have happened, you know, if we even go back as far as TJ Maxx, when the data was being sent over a wireless communications channel that was not encrypted, and the perpetrators were sitting outside of TJ Maxx and capturing that data as it was going over the point of sale system. We actually saw it with Target, and that Target actually had maintained a large amount of data, and data that was old, that when their system was hacked, and I think it was a refrigeration vendor that was a third party that was able to, and hopefully I'm not getting it mixed up with another attack, that was being allowed to write into their, you know, I'll just say their database Target-based system, right? But it was a system that was owned by Target. And the way they received invoices is that they allowed their vendors to basically write their invoice into their system. If you give anyone write access into your system, then they can take control of your system, right? But it's not about compromising Target. Target can be compromised. Target is only as strong as their weakest partner that is allowed to write into their system. And this is just, Target is just the example here, right? And that happened years ago. But, you know, when data is so valuable and you have it, but really don't need it, right? And you're maintaining it, then you become a target. And a target to be exploited, right? And taken advantage of. And so, so when we think about point of sale systems, you want to keep as little information as needed to complete the transaction. Yes, the data allows you to profile your customer, and then you can send them specialized advertisement and everything like that. But how long do you need to keep that data in that form? You know, if you've already trained on that data, your systems on that data, you will be able to predict what anybody, even what I'm going to buy based on the data I've used. Then you don't need my data in raw form anymore, right? Get rid of the data. You don't really need
we
it.
destroy our tokenization after that process just for that reason.
Yeah, so get rid of the data. So then I think one of the things that you were saying is that at Spelman, like, what are we doing to really expose our students to different kind of things? And and all students, I actually have, I also am part of a confidential computing center. It's the Center for Distributed Confidential Computing. It is led by a PI and former colleague that's at Indiana University, Dr. Xiaofeng Wang, but we have Spelman is a part of that center. And as a part of that center, I'm training students in computer science, but with a distributed confidential computing center, what we're doing is building out a platform where we can do computation on data, but in a confidential manner, so that it will allow for data to be aggregated, but not exfiltrated outside of the environment. And so it's using trusted computing, technology and other things. But part of one of the application is, bioinformatics, and using computational biology in order to do some analysis on biological data. And medical data is, it's really identifying. But if I can do that and aggregate that data with other data that needs to be protected in a space where the data can remain confidential, then we have a way of doing analysis and enhancing what's going on in other fields by providing the infrastructure for you to do the computation in a secure and confidential manner. But as a part of this funding, and it's funded by the National Science Foundation, I support researchers, undergraduate researchers. They can be from any school in the AUC. They can be of any major. At Spelman and Morehouse and Clark Atlanta, I don't limit it. They just have to be interested. And so if you are a biology major, we're going to be looking at, computational biology. We're working with computational biologists at Indiana University and some of our other partner schools. So it's important. And I think any student who's interested in learning more about this, there's a place for them in my security and privacy research lab. We're not just looking at security and privacy, but we're also looking at the application spaces that need secure infrastructure in order to protect the data that is being analyzed.
Wow. And you just gave me as we wrap up, is there anything like any you want to promote or recruit students? I know, look, Dr. Hill's social media, we won't talk about her.
Don't
But-
talk about my social media. You already know
Maybe Spelman social media.
that I need to update, my LinkedIn profile, and that's about where you will find me.
Yeah.
I'm not, you know,
But each program, you just talked about a program, are the students that you just talked about, that's from the AU community only, the
Atlanta University Center. For my security and privacy research lab, I'm working with undergraduates from the Atlanta University Center. They are paid a stipend. It ends up being hard to work, beyond the Atlanta University Center for me.
Understood.
So it's easier. The students are, we have face-to-face meetings with this. I mean, everything, I'm trying to limit what I do and have everything related. Like this, the National Science Foundation project is related to the Hewlett Cyber Policy project that was funded by the Hewlett Foundation. The Next Generation Computer Science project that was funded by the Reboot Foundation, talks about applications in robotics and cybersecurity. And our students this summer did many research projects on ChatGPT and data privacy and the security of passwords and why, biometrics haven't replaced passwords and the strength of passwords and why we need them. And so, everything that I'm doing, I'm trying to relate them because I know that there's a limit to what I can do, but all students are welcome in the work that I do, because all students need to know about these things.
Bravo. Well, we thank you for agreeing to come tonight. We're gonna end, look, the church officially, the program officially, but everyone give us a follow, and also on our YouTube channel, our Palm Street YouTube channel. So let me